Coming up, it's opening day for Vindicating Trump. And Debbie and I will talk about aspects of the new film. We're also going to talk about the indictment of New York Mayor Eric Adams, gang wars in Chicago, a whole bunch of stuff. And I'll discuss Booker T. Washington and the art of public speaking. If you're watching on Rumble or YouTube, listening on Apple, Google, or Spotify, please subscribe to my channel. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
America needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
Today is the opening day of Vindicating Trump. Now, even though the movie goes wide, as they say, into theaters today, it did show in some early showings yesterday, Thursday. And so we were getting texts. You were getting some texts from people who were, well, what people do, which is really funny, is they'll screenshot the screen from inside the theater and text it to you. But the early reactions are really good. People seem to really enjoy the movie. Now, of course, it's a vindication for us in a sense. We're always thrilled when that happens. And because we work so hard in making the movie entertaining, captivating. Part of our principle with these films is to sort of never let up. We never want the attention to flag. We never want, it's kind of like saying, I want to write a book. I never want people to put the book down, because if they put the book down, they're a little less likely to pick it up. Now, of course, people do sometimes have to put a book down, but you know what I mean. You want to keep the pace of it going, and the same is true with the film. So tell people, because I'm not sure everyone knows, that the films go through stages, right? There's the conceiving of the film, there's the making of the film, and then now we are in the marketing phase of the film. And because we've done this, we've been around this block a few times. This is, I think, documentary number 8. And you've seen it up close with about 5 films, I think.
Yeah. 5. I've been a part of 5 films.
Yeah.
And I've been a part of the music. So an interesting little tidbit on this one is that I wasn't sure that I was going to actually get to sing for this movie.
Right.
Because of just the rush that we did, having gone to Australia and then London and then trying to finish up the scenes. And I was like, well, when am I going to get to sing? And it was a little bit late in the game. We didn't even know what I was going to sing. And we're like, well, maybe we can bring back America the Beautiful, which I sang for Trump Card, because I did that song for Trump Card, but we did a lot of variations of it. So I did the humming and all of those things.
You did it in different tempos and so on.
And so we had plenty of that. So I knew that if I didn't get to go to California to sing for this one, that we could probably bring back a little bit of that one. But as it turns out, we decided to do the Battle Hymn of the Republic. And
I mean, it's perfect because of the Lincoln analogy in the movie, which is really, just to mention, it's a twofold analogy. The first one is that Trump is probably the most, well, put it this way. The reaction to Trump is so extreme that you've got one group of people that would take a bullet for him. And you've got another group of people that cheer when somebody else tries to put a bullet in him. And I make this point both in the book and we make it in the film, that you have to go back to Lincoln to find somebody who is comparably divisive. Divisive not in the sense that they are just causing division, but that you get this extreme reaction. And then we make the point that with Lincoln, it was over slavery. It wasn't really over the man. But with Trump, it is over the man. So all of this is laid out in the film. And so a Civil War song.
Right.
So continue.
Yeah. So then Brian, who is the score.
This is Brian Miller.
Brian Miller, who does the score. He thought, hey, why don't you do it? But let's get a couple other female voices in there. So 2 of his I guess these are women that have done tracks for him before. come and they do background vocals and they do harmonies. And so I really didn't know what it was going to really sound like at the end, but I think it turned out really beautiful. And then the other thing was he said, during the scene where you and Lara are talking about Trump, the grandfather,
it's the personal side
of Trump. He goes, it would be really cool for you to do some oohing and awing, and I was like, sure, I'll do that. And he goes, but I have the sheet music for that. And I was like, sheet music? What do you mean? He's like, oh yeah, no, it's like a vocal piece, but you have to follow the notes.
It's not generic oohing and awing.
You can't just wing it. Yeah. And I was like, okay. He gives it to me the morning of. And that was more challenging than the battle hymn. I mean, it really was. And so it's kind of cool to listen to it.
We want to emphasize something that people probably downplay a little bit, and that is the centrality of music to a film.
Oh, yeah.
A film is not primarily an intellectual medium. People forget that. We're often deluged by people who say, we need some messaging about immigration, do a film on the border. Now, if you make a film that's entertaining and moving and strikes the right emotional chords, you can actually put a lot of intellectual content or messaging into a film like that. That's what we do. But the primary thrust of a film is there has to be a story, there has to be a narrative, there has to be a journey, there has to be a kind of emotional arc. And the music is actually what's telling you how to feel.
Yeah.
If you're not sure about that, you've told me to do this. Take a Disney film and turn off the music. The whole film, in a sense, falls flat.
Yeah, yeah.
The music is what keeps it going.
It really is. The score is, and because I'm musical, when I watch a movie, the score is what gives me chills. I mean, the scene obviously helps, right? But the music behind the scene is what gives it that emotional thrust, right? And so in 2000 Mules, people asked, did you sing in 2000 Mules? I'm like, no, really, there was really nothing to sing about on that one.
Well,
so
right. It didn't lend itself.
Yeah, it didn't lend itself.
It's probably the only, is it our only film where there really is no, I mean, there obviously is a score, but there isn't
I didn't sing in Police State either.
Yeah.
But, mainly just because just timing, but I was happy to do this one. It was fun,
and there's also a really great. We actually posted it today on social media. This song, Never Give In, Never Give Up, Never Surrender.
Brian.
This is Brian's song, and it's kind of the theme song that plays at the end of the movie, and I released it as a movie clip on my X and other platforms as well today. So, when a film opens, opening day, we have some early hints about how it's doing, partly from the reactions we get, and it's all positive.
Speaking of reactions, if you go see the movie this weekend, we would like for you to, especially if you know me, friends or whatever, and even if you don't, you can message us through the website.
Tag us. Either do a hashtag Vindicating Trump. That's a really good way to tag us. The other thing to do is if just put my handle. If you post on X, just go at Dinesh D'Souza, because that way I can find. What do you tell people what you're saying?
Just a very quick 10 to 20 second reaction video in front of the poster in the movie theater, or as you're coming out, with your reaction to the film. And we will post it. We will repost it.
It's very helpful to us. Well, what it is it gives people a candid idea of what you thought about the film, what you liked about it, what's powerful about it, why people should see it. So, in terms of, people often say, well, what can I do? How can I use my influence? Well, this is a small way that you can use your influence. We will then magnify or amplify it, but it helps us get the message out. So succeeding in the theater is step one. It opens the door to steps 2, 3, and 4. And even sometimes, I've been asked on a couple of these, as you know, I'm on the interminable media circuit, morning to evening. And how many shows am I doing today?
Today, 11.
Yeah, I'm doing 11. Yeah. So, but somebody was asking me, and they often say this, well, Dinesh, what's your plan to get this film to, independence? It's all very well to preach to the choir. People say these sorts of things. Now, first of all, obviously, it's important to preach to the choir. That's why pastors are in business. They preach to the choir. But in an election, it's important to motivate your own side to get them to work, to get them to vote, to get them to spread the word. But here's the point. There is no easy way to get independents and Democrats to go to the theater, right? They're not going to.
No.
And I liken it to selling hiking boots. Like, if I was selling hiking boots, the people who are going to want hiking boots are hikers. That's the natural audience. But let's say someone were to say to me, well, Dinesh, there's a bunch of people, they don't really care about hiking. They're into other things. How do you plan to sell them hiking boots? And I'm like, well, that's not going to be really easy because they don't want to shell out $140 for hiking boots. So you need another group whose main job it is to promote hiking to pitch those people because they have an interest in doing it. And who's that group? Well, it's the RNC. It's the Trump campaign. But I want to make one more point before we take a pause, and we'll pick it up on the other side of this segment. And that is that the way to get independents to watch a movie is to have a movie be successful in the theater with like-minded patriots, because then the left can't ignore it. They've been ignoring our film, right? Nothing in the New York Times, nothing on CNN. But what happened with 2,000 Mules, it became too big to ignore.
But just wait till they see this voter fraud section.
Oh, I know. They're
gonna
freak out.
Freak
they're gonna
out.
They're gonna go.
They're
They're
gonna
go
majorly freak out.
We'll come back to that.
Majorly.
They're gonna go insane. But when the left attacks a film, what happens is it then starts reverberating in the culture. Hit job in Vanity Fair and hit job on CNN, and then the independent guy goes, well, what's all the big hubbub all about? Let me go check it out. That's the way you draw the independent to see the movie.
Yeah, that, or we all have relatives, friends.
Yes.
Well, I don't think I have any friends left that aren't.
You actually do have a few.
I do. But getting those people, like inviting those people to go, you have a sphere of influence within your own community and your own
You might
friends.
have to offer to buy their ticket and take them to tacos and enchiladas afterward.
Oh boy.
You're like, is that really a positive?
Oh my goodness.
Okay, we'll be right back.
Oh.
Think about the massive tax hikes proposed by Harris, an almost 40% top income tax rate, 7% increase to the corporate tax, a capital gains tax on unrealized gains. Her proposals could add almost $2 trillion to a current $2 trillion deficit. You might be thinking it's time to make more of your savings tax sheltered and inflation sheltered. And this is where the people at Birch Gold Group can help you. Birch Gold will assist you in converting an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold. The best news, you don't pay a penny out of pocket. Just text the word Dinesh to 989898. Get a free information kit on gold. No obligation, just information on how you can fortify your savings before the crazy really hits. With an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, thousands of happy customers like me and Debbie, you should contact Birch Gold to talk to them. Text Dinesh to the number 989898. Get your free information kit and get started today. I got a really good deal for you from Balance of Nature, so hold off on purchasing until you've heard what I have to say. Now, if you go to balanceofnature.com to buy their popular fruits and veggies in a capsule, these are the fruit and veggie supplements, a discount offer will pop up. It may say 20 or 25% off your first order. Well, do not click that. Why? Because if you use my code, you'll get 35% off your first order plus free shipping. The special code is just the word America. Use the code and save big. Here's another bonus. Balance of Nature has a risk-free money-back guarantee. So go ahead and find out for yourself what I already know. There's no other product out there like Balance of Nature when it comes to fruit and veggie supplements. Whether you order online or call direct, you got to use promo code America to get the special offer. 35% off plus free shipping. Here's the number to call, 800-246-8751. Again, it's 800-246-8751. Or you can go to balanceofnature.com. When you use discount code America, you get it all, 35% off plus free shipping. Debbie alluded in the last segment to what is maybe the most shocking and astounding part of this film. Now, I don't think it is the most... Someone asked me, what's the most impactful element of the film? I think that is, in fact, the conversation with Trump. It's the centerpiece of the movie. I think I was able to draw Trump out in a way that is kind of unique. Normally, in an interview, he controls the interview so much that questions kind of go begging. They go unanswered. He didn't do that for whatever reason in this conversation. For 45 minutes, he just sat there, he listened, and you can see an expression of him trying to make sense of these questions. You can see the little like tumblers in his mind.
If he likes the question, he smiles at you.
He smiles, and in some cases I see, he does something that you do a little bit sometimes. He mouths the answer softly. Like at one point I say to him, I say, hey, they keep saying that you called for an insurrection. And as far as I can see, you didn't do that. You didn't ask people to go in the Capitol, to stop the count, any of that. I go, but guess what? You could have. And had you called for one, there would be one. And what's interesting is if you watch Trump, without a sound coming out of his mouth, you can see that he goes, true. He says the word true, but he says it with his mouth moving, but no sound comes out, but you know exactly what he's saying. Mm-hmm. Very Trumpian kind of expression. So these little signals of Trump, I think, are helping to give a more rounded picture of the man, show private dimensions that you and I and our families have spotted up close and commented on, but that he maybe has a certain masculine resistance to exposing or revealing in public.
Oh, yeah. No, I get really irritated when people tell me things about Trump, like even my own brother, and I just go, but I know him. I know him unlike you. You don't know the man. You only know the caricature of the man that the media has put out. But you don't know the person like we know the person. And so it's a little
Well, here's
bit...
what your brother's getting. Trump will say in his typical one-liner comedic mode, no, I'm not going to be a dictator. Well, maybe for a day. And I mean, that is a quip. Right?
It's a joke.
It will be treated seriously by CNN. He's going to be dictator. He admits he wants to be a dictator. Then your brother sees that and he goes, well, this guy wants. So what I'm getting at is he's not only is he getting distortions, he's getting distortions that don't even come from Trump, with the context ripped out and a malicious twist put on them.
Right.
But continue.
Right. So anyway, so I feel like anybody that goes to see this movie will get that side of Trump. Maybe not exactly what we see, because Trump does kind of put a little bit of a barrier when it comes to media. And so he's not going to act exactly the same, because if you notice after the interview, he was very polite and he sat there and he answered the questions. But then after the interview, he unleashed,
Well, what happened is we had 45 minutes with Trump and I think it was Margot Martin who works with Trump. At the end of 45, she dutifully goes, time's up. Yeah. And I'd covered all my material, so we were happy. We're starting to wrap things up. Yeah. But Trump hung out for another 45 minutes and was basically giving a diatribe on all the different things in his mind, and in a very animated way.
Yeah. So anyway,
Let's talk about something you alluded to a moment, in the last segment.
The ballot makers.
Yeah. So what do you think is significant about this section? This section comes toward the latter part of the film, and I'll just lay the groundwork for it, because you might wonder, well, what's a section about election fraud, about ballot making, doing in a film that's about Trump? Well, the answer is this. When you make a film about Trump, and someone asked me, well, Dinesh, you think Trump is going to win? And I say, well, yeah, I think he probably will. They'll then say, but what about the election fraud? You of all people should know that the Democrats have cheated. They're going to try it again. Yeah. So we address this topic, and we do it in a very original way. This concept of ballot making has never been raised before. I mean, I thought after Mules, you and I were reasonably conversant with the issue of election fraud, but when we found out about this, we were like, what the heck is this? You can actually make a ballot? Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of, and here's the other thing. So that making ballots goes with, and we just saw this today, North Carolina removes 747,000 people from voter rolls.
747.
So that's almost...
Not 747. 747,000 people.
Almost a million people. And I believe they removed 1 million people from the Texas voter rolls. So here's the thing. It's not, impossible to use fake ballots with fake people.
And fake voter rolls.
And fake
This, I think, is also the key to the illegals, because the reason that the Democrats have been pushing the idea that when an illegal goes for a driver's license, give him a registration form. Because if you can get that guy to check, I am a U.S. citizen, he's added to the, or she is added to the voter rolls.
In Texas, that actually, when you get your driver's license, that is on the form. Do you want to register to vote? You say yes. They send you a ballot. I mean, not a ballot, a registration form. You can lie and say you're a U.S. citizen. They're not going to check it. You really think they're going to go check it? Really?
When we hired 2 investigators to work on this, and I told them up front, I said, listen, don't come and tell us that you can buy ballots and you can make ballots and the ballots are valid. Do it. Show us. Show us that you can buy the ballot stock. Show us that you can take the ballot stock and put the information that appears on a ballot in such a way that it's undetectable. Show us that this ballot will now fit into a tabulator or a ballot counter, that it will actually work as a legitimate ballot. So part of what you see in the movie, and it's very shocking, is not a discussion of how this is done, but a demonstration. Mm-hmm. And what we're really showing is, I think in 2000 Mules, we were looking in the rearview mirror, right? Because we released the film. It had already
happened.
The middle of 2022. Yeah. We're talking about November of 20. But now we're looking forward. We're actually putting ourselves in the mind of the criminals. We're saying, and the reason we're disclosing the vulnerability of our system, we're showing this is how it can be done in a new way, is because by exposing it, it becomes harder, if not impossible, to do. Because now, I mean, we raised this with Laura Trump, the RNC knows about it, everybody will know about it, and I think it's going to be much, much harder to try to pull off a heist of this kind. So this is our public service to election integrity. It's one of the most explosive parts of the film.
It is, and it's very scary because it can happen. And, some people were like, well, do you think that you're kind of giving the other side the idea? Are you giving them the idea? Are you
instructing them in the art of how to rob
And as you always say, well, no, because, if you show them what the Fort Knox, heist.
Tell them that there's a back door that's open.
Yeah, then they're going to know to look out for it. And so we feel like this way they're going to know to look out for these types of things. And also bringing in fake ballots into a little office where
into accounting area.
Look,
I mean, the Democrats are very cunning, as you know, as we talk about. They've been at this cheating business since the 19th century. They tried it out under COVID and got away with it. So they're feeling very confident. They are tapping into their ingenuity. So we have to outthink them. And that's really what we're doing in this film, because our side often doesn't do it. We basically operate like this. The last time they, it's kind of like after 9/11. Let's now have the TSA, because since they used airplanes the last time, they're going to be trying to do exactly the same thing again. No, they aren't. They haven't. And they're not going to. Similarly here, the idea is let's now make sure that the mules are going to be, we're going to be ready for the mules. Well, okay. But now you have to look to see what else they might try. And we got to be ready for them no matter what they attempt to do. Once again, MyPillow has been canceled by another box store, so they are fighting back. They're passing an incredible offer exclusively to my listeners. The standard MyPillow retails for $49.98, but for a limited time, you can have one for just $14.98. Wow. Do not miss out on this amazing deal while supplies last. Order now using promo code Dinesh, or you can call 800-876-0227. But that's not all. Deals all around. You can get a 4-piece towel set for just $25. Brand new mattress topper as low as $69.98. The famous MyPillow bed sheets as low as $25. And there's a whole lot more. To get all these discounts, it's very simple. Go to mypillow.com. The discounts, by the way, include the standard size MyPillow for $14.98, limited, by the way, to 10 per order. Go to mypillow.com. Don't forget to use the promo code. It's DINESH, Dinesh. Are you feeling overwhelmed by the increasing cost of health insurance? Have you had enough of not having control over your healthcare dollars? Well, introducing Share Right. It's healthcare done the right way. At Share Right, you're not just a number, you're part of a caring community, and forget about paying excessive premiums. With Share Right, you stand to save 30 to 50% compared to health insurance. So think about what you could do with all those savings. But it's more than just savings. Share Right ensures you have access to the care you deserve precisely when you need it, from routine checkups to unexpected emergencies. With Share Right, your healthcare is their top priority. Empower yourself today. Take control of your healthcare costs. Visit shareright.org/Dinesh to learn more. See how much you can save. Visit shareright.org/Dinesh. That's shareright.org/Dinesh for healthcare done the right way. We're going to also cover some news of the day, but before I do, let me give you the website vindicatingtrump.com. And please see the movie if you can this weekend. First of all, you'll be one of the first to see it. Second of all, you'll really be helping our cause. You're putting sort of rocket fuel into the movie. You're helping it to spread to more theaters. Opening weekend is widely understood to be pretty critical to the fate of a film. And this film is in 840 or so theaters, close to 850 theaters all around the country. In very rare cases, someone has messaged me, oh, it's an hour away. Normally, it's going to be right in your neighborhood, right around you. There's something like, to take Dallas, I think someone told me 14 theaters right in the main Dallas area. And by the way, don't think that because our films are conservative, that they're going to be only in red America and not going to be in blue America. Our films do well in Portland. They do well in Seattle. They do well in LA. They do well in New York. So our films they're in New England, all over the place. So see it this weekend and help make this film a success. It's also a way to help Trump because the film is a unique type of messaging. It's not like a campaign commercial. It's not even like a podcast where people are just talking about something. I want to make the point that if I were to talk about something, it's not the same as showing it to you. If I tell you, hey, I grew up in India as a kid and it was like this and it was like that, you still don't have a good feeling of it. But if I show you a video and I say, hey, that was me at 7 years old and that was my room and that's the banana vendor who would come down the street or the guy with the trained monkey that does tricks, you'd be like, wow, that's fascinating. That was what India was like in like 1974. And that's what movies can do.
You always use the most bizarre analogies.
No, I'm actually giving you an admittedly memorable portrait. But if I were if I were to paint a picture of me at like 7 or 8, that's probably what would be in the picture.
And you would look the exact same with the exact same hairdo.
This is actually true. I had the same hairstyle that I did as a kid. All right, let's talk about the New York mayor, Eric Adams, who has been indicted.
Big news.
And it's all over the place. And it's the Southern District of New York. And you were saying that I
said, listen, anything coming out of the Southern District can't be good.
You got to smell a rat.
And you know who his lawyer is? Your lawyer, Alex.
Oh, really?
Yeah, his lawyer.
Oh my gosh, that's fascinating.
That's his lawyer.
Well, the thing about Adams is you have to remember, Adams has spoken out against illegals. He has taken some stances against the Biden-Harris regime. It could be that this is a hit inside of the Democratic Party.
Goodness.
Well, I just saw a post by Bill Ackman on X this morning. And now I haven't read the indictment, but this is what he says. He says, in short, the case against Adams is comprised of two main charges, and I'm just going to focus on the first one. He purportedly received airline and hotel room upgrades, and the value of this so-called graft is supposed to be $123,000. But then Bill Ackman says, I've been in the hotel industry. He goes, the face value of an airline ticket and the rack rate of a hotel room are made-up numbers. He goes, when an airline seat is empty, they'll often sell it much cheaper, right? Just like you and I, because we belong to various American Express programs, we'll go to a hotel, we'll go to a room that, let's just say, $500, and they upgrade us to a room for $700. But the point is, they haven't sold that room. So it costs them nothing to do that. And this is the point Bill Ackman is making. In one case, Adams is accused of paying, quote, only $600 for a $7,000 suite. And pictures of the suite are included in the complaint. Right here, I begin to see that this is like nonsense.
Yeah.
This is nonsense because upgrades and so on are routinely given. Think of it this way. You go to an airline, you're in coach, right? And at the last minute, they upgrade you to first class. Is that really worth like $1,400? Of course not. You would never pay $1,400. So,
and what's this about a Turkish thing too? Like,
right.
You know,
so there are some other elements in the complaint, and what Ackman says is, look, a lot of that stuff is unproven, so we'll have to wait and see. But it, as I say, this could be an internecine Democratic hit. The Democrats will sometimes hit their own. Look at Blagojevich.
They're sneaky people, and Blagojevich is all over this. He's all over this. He can smell a rat a mile away.
Blagojevich was, by the way, the governor of Illinois. And the Obama people in Illinois decided to do a massive hit on him. They basically framed him.
They did.
And they were secretly wiretapping him. They got him. He said something that seems indiscreet, but is in fact nothing more than the art of politics. He said something like, this is a very valuable Senate seat, right? And it sounded like he was, quote, offering it as a bribe. But no, what he meant is, in politics, we trade favors. You want me to support you on who gets the Senate seat? You're going to have to offer me something in return. This is the routine back and forth of politics.
Yeah, and so what really got me about that one is that Obama was more involved in that. And they almost like shunned him, like, covered it up and didn't have him even testify or anything like that, because I think there was more to the story. And I don't think Blago actually went there with Obama.
Blago has hesitated to fully point the finger at Obama.
I think he's doing it a little bit more now, but he didn't do it then. But we know that is the case. He was thrown under the bus.
And Eric Adams, like Blagojevich, is a little bit more on the blue doggish side, a little bit more on the moderate side. Now, and this could be partly why they're rooting him out. You said something about,
socialist dude, okay, Jermaine Williams, who backed BLM and defunding the police, is going to be the interim if he has to
if
resign.
Adams resigns.
Yes. Can you imagine? Things are bad now in New York. They really are. But can you imagine if this dude, he would be kind of like de Blasio, right?
I'm guessing things would go from bad to the frying pan into the fire.
Frying pan into the fire. So New York has already seen kind of a demise, so to speak. If this happens, the Big Apple is no longer. I mean, I believe so.
One other development in New York we should talk about. So Letitia James, the Attorney General, was successful in getting Trump to be saddled with this massive fine for supposedly inflating his assets.
That's right.
Now, Trump appealed that decision, and as it turns out, the appellate hearing just took place. And by common reporting, I saw Jonathan Turley's column on it this morning, the appellate court justices, by the way, many of them Democrats, were extremely suspicious, skeptical, and hostile, basically saying, why did this case have to be even brought? In other words, the points that we've heard before. First of all, there is no loser here. Nobody suffered any losses.
Nobody's complaining.
The state of New York is trying to argue that somehow New York suffered losses, but that's just a fictitious... No. And second of all, that who else has been indicted for inflating the value of their assets in a bargaining process with banks, where the banks have their own appraisers and the banks can decide at the end whether they want to make the loan or not. You know what? It's kind of like if you try to sell your house. You say, my house is worth $1.5 million, right? The buyer goes, no, I'll give you $900,000, right? This is a normal bar. No one could say, well, Debbie lied about the value of her house. The appraiser said it was
And the appraiser's value is what's taken into account, right? So,
well, both sides produce competing appraisals.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, this is quite normal. And remember, the other thing about it is they always look at the level of sophistication of the person you're dealing with. Let's say you're dealing with grandma, and you tell her this stone is worth $10,000 and it's only worth $100. Well, you can say you're defrauding her, right? But banks are They're in the business of
not grandma.
evaluating. They're not grandma, right? They've got highly competent appraisers of their own. They're in the
so 3 of the 5 have to decide, right, in order for it to be overturned.
Right. They need a majority on the appellate court to overturn the decision. But it looks like there's a pretty good chance that this decision will be overturned. And that'll be a huge blow, because if you think about it, they've really only gotten Trump in the Alvin Bragg convictions, very likely to be overturned, although that's going to happen much later, probably after the election. It would be great if the appellate court issued a decision promptly overturning the Letitia James case. I'm not sure that will in fact happen, but it would be really good if it did.
It would be. So anyway, lots of things to talk about. And guys, go see the movie this opening weekend. It actually opened last night, Thursday night. And also just saying a little prayer for those Floridians in the little panhandle of Florida.
And the Georgians, because it's pushing up now into...
as you know, I'm very much into hurricanes. I follow them all the time. And I know we dodged a big bullet because it was a Category 4 hitting Florida. And we got a Category 1 back in July, and it was very destructive. So I can only imagine...
For people who are right in the course of it.
Yeah. So prayers out to them, and those of you that can go this weekend to see the movie, go see it and let us know what you think.
Make those short videos and post them hashtag Vindicating Trump, and then also, if you can, on whatever platform it is, just tag me. We're now coming to the latter part, really the final sections of Booker T. Washington's Up From Slavery. I expect to finish this book in the next couple of days, probably by early to the middle of next week. And there's a chapter which is quite interesting and amusing, certainly for me, very gives me a bit of a deja vu feeling, because it's about the art of public speaking. And this is something I've done most of my adult life. When I published my first book, Illiberal Education, I thought of myself very much as a journalist and as an author, but suddenly I realized that within a space of about 10 days or a week, as soon as my book hit the New York Times bestseller list, I got something like 300 speaking invitations that later multiplied to maybe 1,000 over the course of a year. I had to hire a speaker's agent. I found myself speaking almost nonstop from one campus to another, and I've continued a speaking career over the past 25, maybe even more years. So it was with some curiosity that I read what Booker T. Washington has to say about all this. But I want to begin with an invitation that he got. It required him to give a short speech, but not much of a speech. But this is such a powerful and interesting and moving anecdote that I want to relay it. He says that he was asked one time by somebody, what was the greatest surprise that ever came to him? And he answers, it's this. And this is a letter that he got in 1896 from the president of Harvard University, Charles Eliot. Now, this is, of course, Harvard in the old days. This is when not only was Harvard the undisputed leader of American higher education, but Charles Eliot was himself a national figure. He was a well-recognized scholar and public intellectual. Isn't it interesting that for our universities these days, we no longer have university presidents have anything useful to say in the public sphere? Can you name a single university president who has any impact in the general public sphere? No. In fact, in most cases, we don't even know their names. I could in the past, but I cannot now recall the name of the president of Harvard currently, probably of any of the other Ivy League institutions. Anyway, here's his letter from Charles Eliot to Booker T. Washington. Basically, it tells him that they've decided to give him an honorary degree. It is our custom to confer degrees only on gentlemen who are present. The commencement is on June 24th. Your presence would be desirable from about noon till about 5 o'clock. And this is extended to probably a half dozen people who got honorary degrees that year. But this is Booker T. Washington's reaction. He says, as I sat upon my veranda with this letter in my hand, He says, tears came into my eyes. My whole former life, my life as a slave on the plantation, my work in the coal mine, the times when I was without food and clothing, when I made my bed under a sidewalk, my struggles for an education, the trying days I had at Tuskegee, days when I did not know where to turn for $1 to continue the work there, the ostracism and sometimes oppression of my race, all of this passed before me and nearly overcame me. This, to me, is one of the great scenes of this book, and I can almost cinematically envision it in my mind. And then Booker T. Washington immediately, as is customary with him, as is his style, immediately says, I have never sought or cared for what the world calls fame. I've looked upon fame as something to be used in accomplishing good. I care for it only as a means to be used for doing good, just as wealth might be used. So for Booker T. Washington, he is now at the pinnacle. He is famous. He is a national figure. He's getting an honorary degree from the leading university in the country. And he uses this chapter to give us some reflections on public speaking, because this is something that he now does all the time. He says at first, when he was first asked to do public speaking, he said, I don't actually understand why people come to hear me speak. He says, I don't understand the appeal. He gives an example. He goes, some years ago, I was supposed to deliver an address before a literary society in Madison, Wisconsin. An hour before the time set for me to speak, a fierce snowstorm began and continued for hours. I made up my mind there would be absolutely no audience, that I should not have to speak. But as a matter of duty, I went to the church. I found it completely packed with people. He goes on to say that the art of public speaking is the art of establishing a kind of harmony or rapport with the audience. Let me read. There's great compensation, he says, for the preliminary nervous suffering that comes over me when I start speaking. But after I've been speaking, he says, I come to feel that I have really mastered my audience. Then we get into a full and complete sympathy with each other. He says, it seems to me there's rarely such a combination of mental and physical delight in any effort as that which comes to a public speaker when he feels he has a great audience completely within his control. And he says that, in fact, when he has an audience like that in his grasp, he goes, if in that audience of 1,000 people, there's one person who's not in sympathy with his views or is inclined to be doubtful or cold or critical, he goes, I can pick him out. And he goes, when I found him, I go straight at him. And he goes, and it is a great satisfaction to watch the process of him thawing out. So Booker T says, I try to persuade the lone dissenter in the audience. He says, and he's now speaking to people, and this is, I think, very practical advice in public speaking. He says, never speak for the sake of speaking. He says, by and large, you need to have a message to deliver. And he says, you've got to feel that message sort of from head to toe. And he says, when one feels from the bottom of his feet to the top of his head that he's got something to say that is going to help some individual or cause, say it. And he says, and say it without worrying too much about the so-called rules of elocution. He goes, none of those can take the place of not just the content of the message, but what he calls the soul of the message. He then goes on to talk about the fact that very often before he gives a speech, there is a dinner. And here again, you have a guy who started out at the absolute dregs of life and is now going to fancy dinners which have multiple courses, which have elaborate silverware. The outer fork is for the salad, and the inner fork is for the main entree. And he goes, I rarely take part in one of these long dinners, that I do not wish that I could put myself back in the little cabin where I was a slave boy and go through again the experience there. Now, this seems really odd. He seems to be saying, I'd rather be back in slavery. This is actually not what he means. what he says is that he's eating these fancy dinners with all this elaborate rigmarole on his plate. And he goes, but sometimes he sits back. This is a reflective guy. This is a guy, and not many people do this, but it's a really good thing to do, is to try to keep your life as a whole always in mind. So here you are, you're eating dinners. Actually, Debbie and I, when we were out on one of our first dates, I ordered a bottle of really nice wine. Now, it's all kind of funny because I learned subsequently Debbie doesn't really drink wine, but I didn't know that, and she didn't actually let on right away. She kind of held back. And so I opened this bottle of really nice wine and I pour it. And Debbie goes, wow. She goes, wow, Dinesh. She goes, I'm thinking about you coming to America for the first time. When you had no money, you couldn't afford to eat at McDonald's, and here you are, you're like pouring $100 bottle of wine. And so what I'm getting at is, for Debbie, my life in America kind of flashed before her eyes as a whole. This is what Booker T. Washington is doing here. He's looking at this big fancy plate. You know, here's the octopus flambe, and here's the appetizer, here's the aperitif. Would you like red or white wine, sir? And he goes, our usual diet on the plantation was cornbread and pork. But on Sunday morning, my mom was permitted to bring down a little molasses from the big house for her 3 children. And when it was received, how I wished that every day was Sunday. He goes, I'd get my little plate, I would shut my eyes while the molasses was being poured to the plate. And he says, and I always had in my mind the hope that I would get my plate would be full of the molasses. And he says, so strong are my childish impressions of those Sunday mornings, he goes, that basically 2 spoonfuls of this sweet molasses was much more enjoyable, I'm not quoting, to me, than is a 14-course dinner after which I am to speak. So here is now Booker T. Washington, a mature man at the height of his success, nevertheless being able to take in how far his life has come from its very beginning. And I want to close out with a very amusing page in this section on public speaking, where he says, and Debbie will really chuckle about this because this occasionally happens to us as well. In meeting crowds of people at public gatherings, there is one type of individual that I dread. I mean, the crank. The crank. He goes, I've become so accustomed to these people now that I can pick them out at a distance when I see them elbowing their way to me. The average crank, this I find really funny, the average crank has a long beard, poorly cared for, a lean, narrow face, and wears a black coat. The front of his vest and coat are thick with grease, and his trousers bag at the knees. I mean, it's pretty funny that Booker T can actually give a physical description of the so-called crank. And he defines the crank as, quote, someone who has some eccentric process for curing all of the ills of the world at one shot. So he says this one guy comes up to him, for example, and tells him that he's got a new patent in which corn can be preserved for like a decade. You don't have to eat it. It will stay good for about a decade. And he goes, this is the solution to the entire Negro problem in the United States. And Booker T tries helplessly to convince him that, look, we're just trying to grow enough corn that we can eat it. Forget about preserving it for 10 years. But he goes, but these people exist, and you have to kind of watch out for them. And then he goes, the number of people who stand ready to consume one's time to no purpose is almost countless. At one time I spoke before a large audience in Boston in the evening. The next morning, I was awakened by having a card brought to my room with a message that someone was extremely anxious to see me. Thinking it must be something very important, I dressed hastily and went down. When I reached the hotel office, I found a blank and innocent-looking individual waiting for me who coolly remarked, I heard you talk at a meeting last night. I rather liked your talk, so I came this morning to hear you talk some more. So poor Booker T finds himself in the company of a guy who wants him, in effect, to continue his speech. Well, this brings us to the end of chapter 15. I think probably I'm just going to do one more segment on Monday. on Booker T. Washington, and then we will be done with this amazing, I think, fascinating book from start to finish. And we will then move on to the next project.
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and SalemNow.com.